At the will reading, I watched my sister Amanda smile as my parents handed her a check for $10 million. They didn't cry. They didn't hesitate. They just smiled proud and composed, as if they were presenting a trophy for being the daughter they had always wanted. Then they turned to me. "You chose your path, Emma." My mother said, her voice even. "You turned your back on a real career on this family. You decided you'd rather play with mud than make something of yourself. So now," she added, sliding the checkbook back into her purse, "go earn your own." The room was silent. No gasp, no protest, not even from the lawyer. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just nodded once and kept my eyes on the rug beneath the table. The navy and gold pattern seemed suddenly too bright, too loud. Amanda glanced at me with something like pity, but it was faint, buried under satisfaction. Her designer heels crossed elegantly at the ankles. Her nails gleamed pale pink under the light. She was always the one who understood how to dress for moments like this, pristine, polished, prepared to receive whatever was coming to her. I, on the other hand, was wearing a clay-stained linen skirt and a cardigan with a frayed elbow. I had flown in that morning from my little ceramic studio 3 states away. I had closed the kiln at dawn and barely made it to the will reading in time. My father cleared his throat and reached for the stack of documents in front of him. "I think that settles it," he said. My mother nodded in agreement. "Let's not drag this out longer than needed. We've honored your grandfather's memory. Now let's all move on." The lawyer, a man named Harold Bainbridge, elderly and meticulous, adjusted his reading glasses and paused. "There is one more item," he said slowly. My mother's brows tightened. "I thought that was everything." Mr. Bainbridge ignored her and opened his leather briefcase. He reached inside and pulled out a thin envelope yellowed slightly with age, sealed in deep red wax. On the front, written in blocky familiar handwriting, were 5 words that turned the air cold. "To be opened only if Emma is present." Amanda blinked. My father's jaw tensed. My mother's lips parted slightly as if about to protest. But she didn't speak. "I received this from your grandfather Thomas 6 years ago." Mr. Bainbridge continued. "He instructed me not to mention its existence unless Emma attended the reading of the estate." My fingers gripped the armrest. I hadn't seen Grandpa Thomas since the family reunion before he passed. Back then, I was already the family disappointment, having left nursing school and taken a job as an apprentice to an old potter in Oregon. I'd only stayed 2 days. I remember him hugging me a little longer than usual when I left. The lawyer carefully broke the wax seal and unfolded the contents. There wasn't a sound in the room. Not even Amanda's phone buzzed. For once, the world stood still. "There are instructions inside," Mr. Bainbridge said, eyes scanning the page. "And a request. The reading is not complete. You're all to return for a second session in exactly 1 week's time back here, same room. And Emma," he looked up at me, "you are required to be present." Amanda scoffed. "You can't be serious. Are we just going to let her derail the entire process?" "This is legally binding," the lawyer said flatly. "Mr. Thomas Whitaker's estate cannot be closed until these final instructions are fulfilled." My mother stood abruptly, brushing invisible lint off her blazer. "Well, if it's one of Thomas's old sentimental games, so be it. We'll humor him." But I saw it, the flicker of something in her expression. Not irritation, fear. Amanda rose and adjusted her coat. "I hope you enjoy your little moment," she said to me, her voice low. "It's the most attention you've had in years." I didn't answer, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't begging to be seen. Something told me I was about to be heard. Exactly 1 week later, I walked through the heavy oak doors of Whitaker and Associates Law, the same mahogany-paneled room waiting beyond. But this time, I wasn't invisible. Mr. Bainbridge greeted me with a nod. "Miss Whitaker, thank you for being prompt." I took the same seat as before, third chair from the left across from the oil painting of my grandfather that none of us had really looked at last time. Amanda was already there, drumming her manicured nails against the table. My parents arrived 2 minutes later, both dressed as if attending a political fundraiser. No one spoke to me. Mr. Bainbridge placed the yellowed envelope gently on the table as if it were a living thing. The wax seal had already been broken, but the contents were still folded precisely. As I stated previously, he began your father, Mr. Thomas Whitaker, entrusted me with these instructions to be read only in the presence of his full surviving family, and most importantly, only if his granddaughter Emma was present. My mother shifted in her seat. That seems unnecessarily dramatic. He continued without looking at her. There are 3 items enclosed. The first is a written addendum to his will. The second is a letter addressed to Emma. And the third, he paused, lifting a small brass key from his briefcase, is this. He slid the key across the table toward me. I didn't reach for it yet. It looked old with a delicate curve and faded engraving. Amanda leaned forward. What's that supposed to unlock? Some attic full of broken teapots? The lawyer didn't flinch. It unlocks a door in the workshop behind Thomas Whitaker's original homestead located just outside Waverly Creek, the one that was closed off 30 years ago. My mother's face drained of color. That building is condemned. It's been locked since before the girls were born. No, I said quietly, not condemned. Closed. I remembered that workshop. A small stone building behind Grandpa's house with ivy-covered walls and a faded sign above the door that once read, "The Still Room." He never let us go inside. Amanda rolled her eyes. So what now? It's a treasure hunt. Is there some ceramic genie waiting inside to grant her 3 artistic wishes? I ignored her. Mr. Bainbridge unfolded the legal document. In this addendum, Mr. Whitaker states the following. He cleared his throat and read, to my granddaughter, Emma Whitaker, I leave the property located at 45 Lantern Hill Road, including the main house outbuildings and studio. In addition, I bequeath the entire contents of the still room, every vessel, every sketch, every piece of my private collection, along with exclusive rights to any future reproduction sales or exhibitions. Amanda's mouth opened and shut like a caught fish. The lawyer turned the page. To my daughter Margaret and son-in-law Paul, I leave our family home in Coral Ridge and its furnishings. To my granddaughter Amanda Whitaker, I leave the monetary gift already distributed at the initial reading. That was it. My parents sat stiffly. Amanda's nostrils flared. That's insane, she said, standing up. You can't seriously think some shed and a bunch of dusty pottery is worth more than what I got. Mr. Bainbridge spoke calmly. I believe the worth is not in the clay, Miss Whitaker, but in the intent. Amanda turned to our parents. You promised me I'd get everything from him. You said I was the one who stayed. I was the one who attended the holiday dinners, who answered his calls. My mother looked away. You were the responsible one. No, I said, my voice steady. You were the obedient one. Amanda's eyes narrowed. You disappeared, Emma. You walked away. I followed what I loved, I replied. And maybe that wasn't enough for any of you. But it was enough for him. Silence stretched thick across the room. Mr. Bainbridge reached into his folder one last time and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. This is the letter Mr. Whitaker left for Emma. He requested it be read aloud. I didn't know whether to brace or breathe. He began, My dear Emma, if you are hearing this, then I am gone. But please know I left something behind for you, something more lasting than inheritance. A truth I never got to say aloud in this house. You were never invisible to me. I closed my eyes. They called you stubborn, impractical, fragile. I saw the fire in your hands. I saw the way your fingers moved in clay the way mine used to. This family was built on porcelain smiles and glass expectations. But you were made of earth. Amanda shifted in her chair. Mr. Bainbridge kept reading. There's a truth hidden behind the still room door. A truth I never had the courage to show the world. But I saw you, and I knew you could carry it. Unlock it. Then decide what to do. I trust your hands. I trust your heart. Love always, Grandpa Thomas. My breath hitched. For a long time, no one moved. The only sound was the quiet tick of the clock above the door. Then I reached forward and picked up the key. The next morning, I drove to Lantern Hill Road. It had been over 15 years since I last visited the place. Back then, I was 16 and angry, dragging my sketchbook through summer visits, while Amanda wore sundresses and charmed the adults. Grandpa had tried to show me how to throw a simple bowl on the wheel, but my mother had pulled me away before I could finish. She said it wasn't proper for a young lady to come home smelling like a damp basement. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled into the long drive. The house looked exactly the same down to the ivy creeping up the brick and the rusted gate half fallen in the garden. But something felt different now, like the whole place was holding its breath. I walked past the front steps and headed for the path to the studio boots thudding softly against the moss-covered stone. And there it was, the still room. A small stone structure tucked beneath two willow trees, its roof sloped and weathered with age. The windows were so dust-covered they looked like blank eyes. The door stood tall, wooden, and gray, with the original sign above it, the still room carved in thin, deliberate strokes. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the key. The metal was cool in my hand. It slid into the lock like it had never left, and with a single turn, the door clicked open. The smell hit me first. Clay, old books, fire, earth. I stepped inside slowly. Sunlight filtered through the cloudy glass, casting soft, fractured light over everything. There were shelves, dozens of them lined with ceramics unlike anything I had ever seen. Not pots, not bowls. They were sculptures, but not in the traditional sense. They were forms, built from breakage, vessels cracked and then stitched together with gold, plates fragmented, mended with silver seams, vases with jagged voids filled with transparent resin and floating pigments. It was like someone had tried to rebuild grief itself, piece by fragile piece. A low whistle echoed behind me. I turned, startled. "Thought you might come." It was Mr. Lyle. He had been Grandpa's neighbor for decades, and the closest thing Waverly Creek had to a handyman/town historian. He leaned against the doorframe, hands in his worn flannel pockets. "They told me you'd inherited the place," he said, voice gravelly. "Didn't know if you'd actually show." I nodded, still stunned. I didn't know he was making any of this. Lyle stepped inside, carefully avoiding the low-hanging shelves. He never showed anyone, not even me, but I helped him haul some of the big pieces a few years back. Said he was preserving a language no one else remembered how to speak. I walked deeper into the studio, past the central table covered in broken shards and brushes, past a tall cabinet that clicked when I opened it. Inside were sketchbooks, dozens of them, each labeled with a year. The oldest was from 1972. I opened one. Inside were pencil studies, glaze formulas, heat maps of firing sequences. But what made my breath catch were the small notes scattered in the margins. Emma draws like light is leaking through her fingers. She tried coil building today. Didn't follow instructions. Thank God. Margaret doesn't understand. That's all right. Emma will. One day. My throat closed. All this time I thought I was forgotten, left behind. But he had been watching, not from judgment, from hope. I had no idea, I whispered. Lyle nodded, looking around. He once told me broken things were the only ones worth trusting, said perfection was a mask. But the cracked ones, those were honest. I turned slowly, taking in the space. The still room wasn't just a studio. It was a secret, a confession. A lifetime of artistry kept in silence because the world outside refused to understand. And now it was mine. I spent the rest of the afternoon cataloging pieces. I found a kiln in the back still connected to an old gas line, and a filing cabinet full of exhibition rejection letters from the 70s and 80s, all addressed to someone named T.W. Ray. It took me a few minutes to realize T.W. Ray was Grandpa's alias. He had exhibited anonymously, and some of those rejections weren't actually rejections. A few were invitations, sales records, even praise from small galleries across the country. He had never told anyone. At sundown, I sat on the stool by the central wheel. It was still there, metal worn smooth by time. I reached for a chunk of clay from the sealed container on the shelf, instinct taking over. I threw a small cup. It wobbled, collapsed slightly, but I kept going. Lyle left without saying goodbye. He knew. By nightfall, the studio was full of ghosts, but none of them haunted me. They were memories, quiet and gentle. I slept in the main house on an old couch covered in wool blankets, the smell of firewood and glaze clinging to my clothes. For the first time in years, I didn't dream of proving anything. I dreamed of making something instead. A week later, we were back in the lawyer's office. The atmosphere had changed. The first reading felt smug final. This one felt charged. Not loud, but coiled like something waiting to snap. My parents sat close together, tight-lipped and unreadable. Amanda wore a navy pantsuit, her hair slicked back tighter than I'd ever seen it. She didn't look at me when I entered. Mr. Bainbridge, as always, was composed. "Thank you all for returning," he said, placing a thick folder on the table. "Today we complete the final section of Thomas Whitaker's instructions. This will include the estate disclosures related to intellectual property asset valuation and final personal directives." Amanda leaned back, arms folded. I assume this is about her little art shed. I didn't flinch. I was still carrying the scent of clay and ash from the still room. I hadn't showered before arriving. On purpose. I wanted them to smell it, to sit with the reminder that not everything of value is sterile or polished. Mr. Bainbridge opened the folder. "What many of you may not be aware of," he began, "is that Thomas Whitaker, under the pseudonym T.W. Ray, was a renowned ceramic artist whose work, while largely anonymous during his life, has gained critical and financial recognition posthumously. He maintained a private archive spanning over 4 decades. My mother shifted. What does that mean exactly? It means he said turning a page that the intellectual property associated with the T.W. Ray collection, including registered works exhibition rights and reproduction licenses, is now valued at just under $12.4 million. Amanda sat up. What Mr. Bainbridge didn't blink. And per Mr. Whitaker's addendum, the full rights to this collection as well as its physical holdings have been left exclusively to his granddaughter, Emma Whitaker. My father cleared his throat. "You mean the collection's value is sentimental, surely, not liquid?" "No," Bainbridge replied. "The valuation was confirmed by an independent appraiser. One of the sealed bids came from the Corwin Institute of Ceramic Arts. They offered $4 million for a single exhibition contract, and there's already a waitlist for licensing prints." Amanda slammed her hand on the table. "You can't be serious. You gave me $10 million in a check. You're telling me she gets that and a legacy?" "No," I said calmly. "You got the money. I got the work." Mr. Bainbridge nodded. "There is one final request." Mr. Whitaker wished to have one letter read aloud in the presence of his daughter and son-in-law. My mother's eyes narrowed. "I see. One last attempt to shame us." Bainbridge unfolded the letter. "To Margaret and Paul," he began. "I was not a good father. I won't pretend I was. I taught in silence. I built walls instead of bridges. But I hope, perhaps foolishly, that you would break those walls for your own children." He paused. "You didn't. You rebuilt them." My mother flinched just slightly. "You told Emma that art was a hobby. You told her it wouldn't feed her. You told her to choose security over truth. But art did feed her. It fed the part of her no one else bothered to see." Amanda exhaled loudly. "Oh my God, are we really going to let her be canonized as the misunderstood genius now?" I turned to her. "No," I said. "I'm not a genius. I'm a woman who got tired of apologizing for wanting different things." The room fell silent. The lawyer continued. "I didn't raise Emma, but I watched her. I saw her hands speak a language this family forgot. I regret that I didn't fight harder for her while I was alive. So now I leave her something not just to own, but to grow." My father stood. "This is unnecessary. The estate has been divided." On the contrary, Bainbridge said, "This is the division." Mr. Whitaker left no illusions. Amanda was rewarded for her loyalty. Emma was trusted with a legacy. Amanda's voice cracked. "Why didn't he tell me I visited him? I brought him gifts. I stayed connected." I looked at her. "No, you stayed visible. But you were never really present. You asked what he needed, but never who he was." My mother's voice turned sharp. "And what exactly do you intend to do with it all?" "Emma, sit in that dusty shed and spin pottery while the world forgets your name." "I don't care if the world forgets my name," I said. "I care that I remember who I am when I walk into that studio." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Bainbridge closed the folder. "That concludes the legal reading. All documents will be filed with the county by end of week. If there are no further questions. There are, Amanda snapped. How do I contest this? You don't, he said. Your inheritance has already been dispersed. You agreed to its terms. What remains is not yours to challenge. Amanda's lips parted, but no words came out. Her hands trembled slightly. I recognized the look, not grief, not even rage. It was emptiness. My father muttered something about needing air. My mother followed him out without a word. Amanda lingered by the door. You think this makes you better? She asked. No, I replied. It makes me free. And then I walked out first. I didn't open the letter right away. Even after everything, after the reading, after the walkout, after Amanda's final words, I couldn't bring myself to unfold the paper. It sat on my work table in the still room for 3 days. I'd glance at it between firing cycles and glaze tests, my hand hovering above it before pulling back. But on the 4th night, when the wind outside howled against the stone walls, and the only light came from the kiln's dull orange glow, I sat down and broke the seal. It was handwritten, of course. Grandpa's penmanship was sharp and deliberate. The ink faded slightly at the edges. Emma. If this is in your hands, then I am finally out of time. But I hope you are not. There are things I said too late, and more I never said at all. So I'm saying them now. I inhaled slowly and kept reading. When you were 9, you sat at that corner wheel and made something hideous. It collapsed 3 times. Your hands were covered in slip. Your braid kept falling into your face and you refused to give up. You didn't look frustrated. You looked curious. That's when I knew. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You were trying to understand. I wanted to tell you that night that I saw myself in you, but I didn't. Your mother had made her position clear, and I was a coward in more ways than one. You should have been encouraged. Instead, you were diminished. You should have been celebrated. Instead, you were corrected. But you never stopped creating, even when they stopped watching. Especially when they stopped watching. The page shook slightly as I turned it. I wasn't just making art in the still room, Emma. I was recording grief. Every piece you find in there carries a wound. Some are mine. Some belong to people I loved. I worked under the name T.W. Ray because no gallery wanted the Whitaker name attached to anything other than tradition and money. So I erased myself. But in that erasure, I found freedom. And then I found you. Your mother was raised to believe that vulnerability is failure, that feelings are dangerous. She passed that on to you in ways I deeply regret. But you were always stronger than the silence around you. I paused, my throat thick. You don't need my blessing to keep going, but I want to give it to you anyway. You are allowed to be gentle and brave, quiet and loud, messy and magical. You are allowed to choose beauty over efficiency, joy over approval. The still room is yours, not just the space, but the story, the history, the mess, the healing, the unknown. Do with it what I could not. Make it loud. Make it seen. Invite others into the process. Let them break things. Let them remake them. Not everything has to be preserved in perfect shape. Sometimes the crack is the point. I stopped and exhaled. It felt like I had been holding my breath since the first word. And Emma, do not waste your time asking for love from people who only know how to measure worth. You are not a metric. You are a force. I didn't always know how to say I loved you, but I did. With every sculpture, with every glaze, with every time I told someone in town my granddaughter's got her own studio. You were never invisible to me. You were inevitable. I am proud of you, not because of what you'll do next, but because of what you've already done. You stayed kind. You stayed curious. You stayed whole even in pieces. That is more than legacy. That is art. With all the love I couldn't say out loud. Grandpa Thomas. I folded the letter back along its original creases, each one soft and worn like it had been read many times in his own hands before ever reaching mine. Outside, the night was quiet. The kiln clicked as it cooled. On the windowsill, one of Grandpa's earliest vases stood with a fine crack running through its side, repaired in gold. I had always thought he did that as an aesthetic choice. Now I knew better. He was speaking in a language of survival. The next morning, I wrote a note of my own and pinned it to the studio's front door. Open workshop series for women who have been told they are too much or not enough. Come break things, come make things. The first weekend, 3 people showed up: a retired teacher, a nurse with 2 grown sons, and a woman who had just finalized her divorce. I gave each of them a small, imperfect mug from the back shelf. "Let's start with breaking," I said, handing them hammers wrapped in cloth. They looked confused. Then they laughed. And then they began. 2 weeks after the final reading, Amanda showed up at the still room unannounced. I was glazing a batch of pieces from the first workshop mugs and bowls patched with gold seams, each one stamped with the name of the woman who had made it. The front door creaked open, and I turned, expecting one of my regulars. Instead, I saw a familiar silhouette in a trench coat far too elegant for Waverly Creek. Amanda stood there unsure. "I didn't come to fight," she said, her voice low. I didn't reply. I just straightened up and wiped my hands on a towel. "I thought maybe I could see it," she added. "The place." I gestured silently toward the room. She walked in slowly, eyes sweeping over the shelves, the old kiln, the cracked pieces on display. "You fixed them," she murmured, pointing to a plate lined in silver. "But you left the breaks visible." "That's the point," I said. Amanda moved toward one of the cabinets, then hesitated. "Why didn't he tell me?" she asked. "That he was doing all this?" I shrugged. "Maybe because you never asked." "I did," she insisted. "I called him. I brought him wine for Christmas. I went to the family dinners. Sure, I said you were always there, but being in the room isn't the same as being present." She flinched. "You think I didn't love him?" I sighed, placing a bowl on the drying rack. "I think you loved what he represented. You loved being his favorite. You loved being praised. But you didn't love this. Not the messy part, not the truth." She folded her arms, voice tightening. "You're not the only one who felt unseen, Emma. You just gotta run from it." I stayed. I followed the rules. I gave up things too. I turned to face her fully. "You didn't stay. You performed. That's not the same. You chose applause. I chose silence. Both of us were alone." That shut her up for a moment. Amanda's eyes fell to the floor, then to the workbench where Grandpa's old notebook lay open. She reached for it but paused. "I thought being perfect would earn me safety," she whispered. I said nothing. "He left you the legacy," she said quietly. "But he left me the silence." She looked up. "You think I don't envy you?" That stunned me. "You envy me. You gotta be real," she said. "Even when it cost you everything." "I've never been real a day in my life." Her voice cracked slightly. It was the first genuine sound I'd heard from her in years. "I don't expect forgiveness," she added. But I needed to say that. I nodded once. She turned toward the door. "Wait," I said. I picked up a mug from the shelf, one of Grandpa's older imperfect ones, patched in gold but not yet glazed. I handed it to her. "What is this a reminder?" I said. She looked at me confused. "That even if you break again," I added, "you can come back." Amanda clutched the mug carefully and left without another word. Later that week, my mother emailed. It was brief. "Emma, we'd like to schedule a family mediation. Your father is concerned about the press inquiries. Let us know if you'll participate. M." No greeting, no warmth, just pressure as always. I didn't respond. 3 days later, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. His tone was forced, polished, corporate. "Emma, we're hoping to move forward with grace. Your grandfather's estate has attracted interest that may affect our family name. If you're willing to handle this discreetly, we're open to revisiting certain terms of inheritance." He meant money. They still didn't understand. Not really. So I sent them a photo. It was of a workshop piece, a bowl smashed and reassembled with red lacquer seams. On the bottom, I had engraved a single line: "Not everything broken needs to be repaired." They never replied, and I didn't wait for them. At the end of that month, I stood beneath the warm glow of pendant lights in the newly refurbished gallery space next to the still room. I'd renamed it Golden Faults after the Japanese philosophy of kintsugi, the art of repairing ceramics with precious metals. The exhibit that night was titled Inheritance, but it wasn't about money. It was about women. Each piece in the show was made by someone who had been told they weren't enough. Too loud, too quiet, too soft, too angry, too complicated. Each piece was a vessel once broken, now whole in a new way. The names of the artists were written in gold ink beneath their works. Not my name. Theirs. At the center of the exhibit stood Grandpa's first cracked vase, the one he kept hidden his whole life. I'd placed it on a pedestal made from reclaimed wood. Behind it, a quote was etched into the wall. Sometimes the crack is the only part that tells the truth. T.W. Ray. People wandered in and out. Some asked questions. Others cried. One woman whispered to me, "I didn't know I was allowed to be visible." I told her she always had been. She just needed a room that didn't ask her to shrink. That night I walked home through the backfield behind the studio, clay still under my nails and the scent of ash in my hair. I passed the magnolia tree Grandpa had planted when I was born. It was blooming. In the months that followed the exhibit, the still room stopped being just mine. At first, it was a slow trickle. One or two women asking if they could stay after class. Clean brushes, sit quietly while the kiln cooled. Then came the questions. Not about technique, but about grief, about identity, about what it meant to start over at 55 or 62 or 71. They didn't want to learn pottery. They wanted to remember themselves. So we rebuilt the space. We cleared out the back room and turned it into a small tea corner with mismatched chairs and chipped mugs. We opened the front garden and planted herbs and wildflowers. One woman brought her guitar, another offered to teach breathing exercises. I didn't plan any of it. I just said yes when someone asked to add something. The studio became a quilt stitched together from what we all had left. We called it the Still Room Collective. On the first Sunday of spring, we hosted an open event. No tickets, no sign-ups, just an open door and a handwritten sign. Come sit with your story. People came, dozens of them. There were women who hadn't touched clay since high school, women who had never dared to try. One woman brought her teenage granddaughter who wore a sweatshirt that said, "I'd rather be weird than invisible." We made things that day. Beautiful, wobbly, imperfect things. Bowls shaped like tulips. Cups that leaned a little to the left. Tiny dishes for holding rings or tears or stories. I started each session the same way: break something. At first, people hesitated. They were afraid to ruin, to destroy, to be blamed. But then someone would smile nervously, tap a plate against the table, and suddenly the room would fill with laughter with the sound of letting go. I kept Grandpa's wheel in the corner untouched. His apron still hung by the door. I didn't need to wear it. I wasn't becoming him. I was building something he only dreamed of. Not a private refuge, a public sanctuary. That spring, I applied for a community grant. I used photos from our exhibit, testimonials from workshop participants, and Grandpa's original designs for the still room. I wrote the application in one sitting and ended it with a single sentence. We're not teaching people to be artists. We're reminding them they already are. 2 months later, we were approved. The funding allowed us to expand. We bought a second kiln. We offered scholarships for low-income women and survivors of domestic abuse. We added a program for caregivers who had lost themselves in other people's needs. Every time I passed the gallery, I felt something loosen in my chest. This wasn't a comeback. It wasn't revenge. It was resurrection. I still thought about my parents sometimes. I'd see their names in charity bulletins or business newsletters. My mother had joined the board of a luxury retirement project in Florida. My father had become a mentor to young CEOs. But I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. The silence between us no longer felt like punishment. It felt like permission. And Amanda, she surprised me. She came back, not with cameras or lawyers or apologies. She came for a Saturday class. She didn't wear makeup. She didn't speak much. She made a small soap dish, glazed it pale green, and cracked it on purpose before reassembling it. She left it on the shelf labeled, "For sale, pay what you can." Later that day, I found a note folded underneath it. Some things aren't meant to be kept, just passed on. She never signed it, but I recognized the handwriting. We didn't become sisters in the way people expect. We didn't hug. We didn't cry together. We didn't fix the past. But we showed up. And sometimes that's more than enough. That summer, the local newspaper ran a feature on the Stillroom Collective. They called it the studio for women who refused to disappear. People started driving in from other towns, a few from out of state. One woman said she had driven 5 hours because her friend said it's not a pottery class. It's a mirror. I understood what she meant. We weren't making bowls. We were making space. One night after everyone had gone, I stayed late. I sat at the central work table, tracing my fingers over the old scars in the wood, the same ones Grandpa had carved by accident with his tools. I imagined him sitting across from me, not young or old, just real. Not perfect, just present. The wind rustled through the trees outside, carrying with it the smell of rain and lavender from the garden. I whispered into the quiet, "I'm doing it, Grandpa. Not for him. For me, for every girl who was told she was too fragile, too sensitive, too strange. For every woman who had to make herself small to fit inside someone else's version of love. For every person who thought their crack made them less. We had learned something in this place, something sacred, that when something breaks, it doesn't stop being beautiful. It just starts being true. It was a Thursday afternoon when Amanda returned again. I had just finished cleaning the brushes from our morning session when I saw her through the front window standing beside the magnolia tree Grandpa had planted. She wasn't wearing one of her usual structured coats or expensive scarves, just jeans, a cardigan, and sneakers. Her hair was loose, no makeup. She stood there for a while before coming in. I didn't say anything when the bell above the door rang. She stepped inside, slowly scanning the space like it might vanish if she looked too closely. "This place," she said quietly. "It feels different." I nodded. "It is." She glanced at the walls where photos from our workshops were hung, smiling women, gold-lined pottery, handwritten quotes. One wall held nothing but cracks repaired with light. She walked toward the back shelf and picked up a small notebook, the kind we gave to new students on their first day. On the cover was Grandpa's quote embossed in foil. "Sometimes the crack is the only part that tells the truth." She opened it. Her hand trembled slightly. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you said, about being present, about how I used to perform." Her voice faltered. "I don't even know who I am without the performing." I stayed quiet. I spent so long trying to be what they wanted, efficient, successful, unbothered. And now, she looked up at me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "I don't know how to talk to people who expect me to be real." "You don't have to know," I said. "You just have to keep showing up." She blinked, surprised by the gentleness in my tone. "I was cruel to you," she admitted. "Not just when we were kids. Always. I made everything a competition you didn't even want to be in." I nodded once. "You did." She looked down. "I don't know how to make that right. You don't have to fix the past," I said. "But you can stop pretending it didn't happen." A pause. Then tentatively she asked, "Would it be okay if I volunteered here, just behind the scenes, cleaning, organizing? I won't get in the way." I studied her for a long moment. Amanda, the girl who used to laugh when I brought home clay under my nails, was now asking to sit in the same space she once mocked, not because she had something to prove, but because she had run out of places to pretend. "Sure," I said. "You can start with the shelves in the back, the ones labeled incomplete." She smiled, small, almost sheepish. "That feels appropriate." As she walked past me toward the back room, she paused. I wrote something she said, a little guide for the women who have trouble speaking in front of others. Thought it might help. I printed a few copies. She handed me a thin folder. I flipped through it. Inside were notes on public speaking, calming breath techniques, how to stand without shrinking. "It's not perfect," she added quickly, "but it's gentle." I looked at her. "It's good," I said. "It's real." She smiled wider this time, not performative. At the end of her first full day volunteering, I found her sitting at the tea corner sipping from one of the mugs she had helped glaze years ago without knowing. Around her, 3 women were chatting about the colors they wanted to try in next week's workshop. Amanda didn't interrupt. She just listened. She didn't try to lead or impress or shine. She just sat in the quiet, present. Maybe that's how healing starts, not with apologies or declarations, but with presence, with willingness, with being seen and choosing not to run. We're not sisters in the way movies portray it. We don't share secrets over wine or finish each other's sentences. But in this small sanctuary our grandfather left behind, we've stopped pretending. And somehow that feels more honest than forgiveness. It feels like truth. It's been nearly 6 years since the first will reading, 6 years since the room went quiet after the lawyer opened that yellowed envelope, since Amanda stormed out, since my parents stopped calling. I haven't spoken to them since. Sometimes I see their names in newsletters or tagged in charity event photos from Florida smiling with other retirees in pastel linen. I don't feel angry anymore. I don't feel much of anything. They didn't come back, and I didn't chase them because I'm no longer living in the house where love is something to be earned. I'm building something else. The Stillroom Collective has grown beyond anything I imagined. What began as one dusty studio now spans 4 rooms and a garden courtyard. We host monthly exhibits featuring artists over 50. We partner with women's shelters and aging centers, offering creative spaces to those often overlooked. And people keep coming. Mothers, daughters, widows, survivors. Artists rediscovering their craft after decades of silence. Women who thought it was too late to start again. They gather here not for perfection, but for process. We don't sell masterpieces. We sell reminders that you can break and still be whole. That a story told honestly is more beautiful than one told smoothly. That your hands know more about your strength than your voice sometimes can. There's a bench at the far end of the courtyard tucked beneath an old olive tree we planted 3 years ago. Grandpa's original work apron is framed nearby, along with one of his earliest sketches, a lopsided mug with the note, "Too heavy, too messy, still worth keeping." I sit there some mornings before the studio opens, coffee in hand, listening to the sounds of clay, being wedged of laughter in the next room of women reminding each other, "You don't have to get it right, just get it honest." Sometimes Amanda joins me. We don't talk about the past. We talk about the garden or the students or the new kiln we're hoping to buy next year. She still volunteers once a week. The kids from the intergenerational program call her Coach A. It suits her better than I expected. She never apologized directly, but she shows up. And that's enough. I keep Grandpa's letter in a drawer near the front desk. It's folded neatly creased at the corners from the times I've opened and reread it. I don't need it as much now, but I like knowing it's close. Like his voice is still somewhere in the walls, in the wheel in the wind that rustles through the garden before sundown. Last month, a young woman from out of town visited. She was in her 20s, quiet, clearly overwhelmed. She stood in front of a gold-repaired bowl and whispered, "I didn't know I was allowed to take up space." I handed her one of our notebooks. The first page read, "You were never invisible, just waiting to be seen by the right light." She cried. Then she smiled. Then she stayed. That, I think, is the real inheritance. Not money, not a name, not even the studio. But the knowledge that visibility isn't something others grant us, it's something we reclaim, one break at a time, one truth at a time. Grandpa didn't leave me a business. He left me a beginning. He didn't save me from the silence. He trusted me to speak into it. And every time I shape clay or guide someone else's hands, I feel it again, his quiet gift. Not just the studio or the letter or the legacy, but the permission to begin again and again and again.